Agile and DevOps. In this section, we're going to look at why DevOps starts with Agile. Then I'm going to help you create your first backlog. And then we're going to move on to storyboarding and how useful that is within Lean UX. And then finally on to the Work Items Hub, which is a new feature that's recently been introduced. Why Agile development starts with Agile. We'll be looking at the importance of combining both Agile with DevOps when building software. I'll also be introducing both the Microsoft Visual Studio Team Services product and the Team Foundation Server product. Let us start with Agile. Back in 2001, the Agile Manifesto was born, made up of 4 well-known key values combined with 12 principles to help organizations shift from traditional V-model waterfall methodologies to more iterative software development, with a view to help those organizations respond quickly to change and release software faster. So when it comes to Agile and the definition of Agile, I like to take the Scaled Agile Framework definition of combining the lean mindset with those principles of the Agile Manifesto. It's important to apply these in the traditional sense because we used to have large delays before releasing over large periods of time, which made the software development extremely frustrating. We also had very lack of feedback or lack of insight from any kind of sequential approach or linear approach to software development. We had to wait right to the end to be able to get any understanding from the customer if it was right or they was expecting to something else. So when we combine Agile with DevOps, there's a shift towards an emphasis of failing fast and learning much more rapidly. So this is proving a hypothesis of an idea as early as physically possible to prove that it meets the customer expectations. So let's just quickly go and address the elephant in the room. DevOps is a really challenging subject to talk about because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And depending on if you agree that it's a cultural, people-focused methodology, or it's a more technology-centric approach, or it's more around process. I'd like to take the Gartner reference for these 3 individual areas. For people, looking at how autonomous teams work, site reliability engineers, and job rotation, and then building on that to look at the processes that you are involved. Similar to Agile, things like minimum viable product, feature flagging, chaos monkey, canary rollout are all words that you may have heard organizations talking about when it comes to DevOps and Agile, and things like value stream mapping and continuous integration, testing, and delivery. Underlining that, there's a whole stack of technology, infrastructure, platform as code, chat ops, and also you've got to look at the behavior, which is where the culture side of things comes in, around collaboration, and also this engineering and learning and trust culture as well within the organization. So DevOps means different things to different people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply DevOps within this Microsoft stack and break it up into 3 separate areas: people, process, and technology. So let's start with the people aspect. When it comes to the technology that we're going to be talking about, like Visual Studio, Team Services, and Team Foundation Server, TFS, part of it is enabling people to collaborate together. So this is this collective ownership and collaboration where we're using a tool that could be distributed across the enterprise to be able to manage the way that you work and how you want to work within your organization. Whether that's an Agile, Kanban, or some kind of approach that you may already be taking, or it could be a traditional sense of more structured waterfall approaches such as CMMI. So there's lots of flexibility of how people and personas are applied within these tool sets and also methodologies. There's a number on the screen at the moment which you could potentially relate to, whether or not you're in the development side of things or within the test side of things or even the operational side of things, or you could be someone from the business. Each one of these roles must be supported within the tool sets to be able to allow them and enable them to actually do their daily work. So let's go to the process quickly. And as I said, a lot of this process was around continuous learning. It was about the ability to fail forwards. It was embracing different types of deployment and delivery approaches like test-driven development, behavior-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, all different methodologies for the making component of that to build and deliver software. But what I'd like to introduce is the thinking side, which we're definitely seeing more within the industry, which is around things like lean UX, lean startup, approaches to quickly design software. So this is this fail fast, learn rapidly experiments that can prove a hypothesis quickly. So that brings us into the final stage of the feedback cycle being the learning. At this point, we are really embracing this ability to learn from every step that we do to create better software. And this really sits within an operational sense, but it also sits in every other business and also the development lifecycle. So why this big change? So let's just quickly apply these concepts to every day. So first of all, the business traditionally, especially when it comes to things like requirements engineering, are the definers of the problem space that they may have. So there's a lot of thinking activities around there. And that typically those requirements in a sequential approach or a linear approach of them being passed over to development to be able to then make the software that then is thrown over the wall and into some kind of operational sense deployed into a production environment. And typically we would have some learnings from that, so whether or not the software is being used or how the behaviors of those users are, but that rarely comes through to the feedback of the business to say, well, the idea that or concept that you came up with was what the customers really wanted, which is why the iterative approach came through. So part of it is within the marketplace at the moment, a lot of teams are already saying, well, they're already doing Agile or they're already doing DevOps. And part of this is a way of addressing the underlying problem that we were having with this requirements engineering phase, what percentage of rework was based on the requirements being incorrect, and also about the amount of effort that was taken, and as far as time and also material as far as cost. And there's a huge growing challenge around the cost of having an issue in production. This was a big driver, was around how much this would cost for a system to go down in a production sense. But if we bring all these challenges around within the organization, this has driven us towards looking and approaching DevOps and Agile as a combination of approaches to allow us to support these 3 cycles. So that's a little bit about process, and there's a lot more information that's available online. Finally, on to the technology. I'll be covering this in more detail in the next chapter, but I just wanted to highlight quickly the 2 main platforms that will be throughout this course demonstrated. First is the cloud-based offering from Microsoft, Visual Studio Team Services, otherwise known as VSTS, and this platform is hosted on Azure, on Visual Studio Online. And the second, which is an on-premise offering for Team Foundation Server, otherwise known as TFS, that you can host locally within your corporate enterprise. I'm going to go through this in much more detail as we go through the course, but the technology stack will represent the various different stages of plan, develop, release, and operate. And we'll be going through this in much more detail throughout the course. So let's move on to the next video, how you can create your backlog.